Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Phygital Learning. I am so excited to be leading my second episode of the day. We are here to talk about FETC. FETC just happened in Orlando last week, and I was honored to be there as a featured speaker. So I took furious notes and tried to pay attention to the whirlwind 4 days that we were all together in Orlando. And the purpose of this session is really to help people who are not able to attend this or other conferences to be able to catch up on what's going on. If you know us at Phygital Learning, you know that we really highly value all educators and want to provide that experience to even those who don't have the funding in their school system to attend national or regional conferences and events. So this is our first Phygital Learning recap of an event, and we're going to jump right in. I have 5 themes that were pretty apparent throughout the conference, and we're going to jump in and talk about each one of those themes. So the first theme was the generative AI classroom. Obviously, all we've been talking about for the last 3 years, it feels like, in education is generative AI. This image is of Alana Winnick, the keynote speaker, who I'm honored to know and call a friend, and she did an amazing job of capturing the balance between student empowerment and student creativity and AI and automated systems in this gamified game changer theme. It was one of the best keynotes I've ever seen, and I have been to 20 years of edtech conferences. So congratulations, Alana. The sessions and demos that were happening around the event really focused on how AI could support instruction and feedback and efficacy rather than replacing teachers. This is a theme we're hearing over and over. So many strategies included critical thinking, lesson design, formative assessment. Those were topics happening in the keynotes and the breakouts. There was also a really strong thread on AI literacy for students and how AI connects to the future workforce and career technical education pathways. And that's something that we're starting to see happen, people developing courses for CTE classrooms specifically. So that's our theme. I want to dig in now a little bit into some things that we heard connected to the theme. So in 2023, the question on the table was, should we use AI? Here in 2026, that's no longer the question. The question is now, how do we design human-centered systems around AI? So we're no longer having to convince people to use it. It's pervasive, it's persistent, it is pushing its way in to everything that we do. Every app now is like, oh yeah, we're running AI. So now the question becomes, how do we facilitate human design around these AI systems? And that's something that definitely shown at the conference in the Expo Hall. People were really talking about that human-centered element. Here's a quote from the conference: AI is the engine, humans are the architects. Just really implementing that human in the loop, human end to end, human before and after. There's lots of ways that we talk about it, but helping people understand that AI is a tool just like spell check and calculators, but the humans are the ones really doing the work. Creativity, empathy, and purpose were all non-negotiables. These are things that were really shining in the generative AI conversations. We're no longer, talking about how AI is more creative than people. We've kind of swung back into making sure that those human elements are focused on where they belong. Another big theme was that AI should amplify and not replace. So whether that's teaching or learning or students or ideation or brainstorming or editing or revision or coding or image creation, like all of that that AI can be involved in, that AI should be supporting that work, not an outsourced. Finally, target use cases throughout the event included accessibility, multimodalities, and diversity. So we saw a lot of conversations around getting beyond that basic level of AI, moving into environments where students are truly being supported where they're at through video, audio, music, interactions, through a diverse range of experiences, and also translation and captioning. So if you're looking to adopt an AI tool in your school district, be thinking about some of these things. What shows up first on their website, in their media marketing? What is the message that they're sending? And does it fit human-centered, creative, empathetic, amplification of skill set, multimodality, diverse, accessible? If it doesn't fit those things, that company is behind the curve and they need to maybe take some feedback from you on that. So for each one of these themes, we're also going to jump into what we saw in the Expo Hall. So from the Expo Hall, the tool that I'm pointing out is Brisk. Brisk is a tool that I've been using for quite a while, and so this wasn't new to me. The other tools I'm going to point out from FETC, many of them were new to me. But the reason I'm pointing this out for the generative AI conversation is because they were at FETC in a huge booth promoting their Brisk barbecue as usual. But one of the things that I really appreciated is their focus on, and I put this on the screen, giving educators the power to craft the content. So what Brisk does a really great job about, and when he talked about this a lot at FETC in the booth, which I visited, they talked about how teachers really are in control. It's not just that the teachers are going to click a few buttons and generate a lesson plan and go teach that to their students. They're in the driver's seat with Brisk Boost and Brisk Next, being able to control and refine exactly what they need. Brisk also just announced this week that they will be integrating curriculum. So as a school now, you say, oh, we use Pearson Math and we use Houghton Mifflin Language Arts or whatever, and they're going to be able to pull that into their generations as well. So highly customizable and something that really fits the talking points that were happening around the conference. I do have a free month trial sign up code for anyone who's interested. It's on screen and I've just put it in the meeting chat there. I don't get anything for that. I just want you all to have access to one free month if you've never used Brisk before. So let's move into theme 2. Theme 2, cybersecurity and safety. So a major strand at the event, of course, targeting IT leaders, district decision makers, protecting learning environments is a big deal. We've always felt that way in education, but in a world of AI, it's become even more important. So these sessions and offerings really highlight threat detection and data privacy, incident response planning, tailored to K-12 specifically. We also saw a lot of conversations around physical safety and digital safety, so creating secure and sustainable environments, not only for one-to-one and cloud-based learning, but also our classrooms and schools. The pictures that I'm showing in this presentation are all coming straight out of FETC. They're not mine, straight from the FETC social media. So they're, high quality and representing things that happened around the event. So I just want to point that out. So some sound bites from a culture of trust. First of all, less tech purchase, more culture and trust. That was definitely a theme that we saw happening at the event, meaning companies and schools and systems were talking less about what can we buy and more about how do we trust you as the starting point of the conversation. A lot of people asking questions about where their data is going and how private it is and how well they're focusing on building a school community versus managing a bunch of students. Very, very interesting shift there. One soundbite from the event is trust is the new currency. I love that. We've been talking a lot in edtech for the last 2 decades on how, your data is currency. And then we shifted to your attention is currency. And now I think we've hit a new layer. Trust is the new currency. And maybe there'll be a blog post about that for me sometime. Prioritization of transparency, data privacy, and ethical safeguards are better adopted tools. So if your teachers are more trusting of a tool, they're more likely to use it. And I think we've seen that amplified in our world of AI, where people are skeptical of a lot of the tools and what's happening with their data, and so they're not willing to use it. We have students who are boycotting generative AI tools, saying that they're not good for the environment, they're not good for their data. So trust is going to continue to be a big deal. Identity is the new perimeter. That's another quote from the conference where we're talking about you and your personal data being guardrailed and boundaried, and how that's something that people are not willing to cross. I think it's interesting after 30 years of letting companies like Google take our data. It's part of their user agreement, it's part of their model. I'm not bashing Google here, it's just simply part of how they do business, is using our data. And now people are really pushing back on that. We're pretty far into that journey with Meta harvesting massive amounts of our data and repurposing it into ads and algorithms. And now people are starting to wonder if that was a good idea after all. So excited to see where that takes us. Staff education being as important as tools. And I don't just mean leading professional development, even though, of course, that's what we do here at Phygital Labs a large part of the time, and we want to be involved with your PD. But more importantly, it's talking about the education of the tool itself, not just showing people how to use a tool, but how it works and how it's built and how it is safe. And that education, understanding the tool and creating some trust, is going to continue to be incredibly important. All right. From the Expo Hall, I'm going to highlight Vivi. Vivi is a tool that I've been connected to for quite a while now. It's a wireless display solution. But one of the things I really appreciate about Vivi in this cybersecurity theme that I'm talking about right now is that it now integrates an emergency response notification. So from a district-wide system or even from a front office, anyone can push out an emergency notification that will go to every single connected device. And that's something that can be incredibly valuable for a variety of reasons. Obviously, natural disasters, school assemblies, we can even make announcements about those. It doesn't have to be an emergency. And Vivi is designed for education specifically. It also has screen sharing that's two-way, so kids can be showing their screens back and forth, which gets us out of the cybersecurity environment. But I wanted to highlight the work they're doing because, again, they're specifically built for schools, which allows us to trust them a little bit more when we know that they're not a corporate tool. All right, let's move on to theme 3, immersive and hands-on learning. So the Expo Hall, the innovation pavilions, there were so many spaces within FETC where you could try things out. There was even gaming, Giant Connect 4 and Cornhole and giant checkers and chess, tabletop games, all sorts of things that were filling the expo and the spaces with play and hands-on learning. We loved that. Attendees could try tools out of STEM and robotics and immersive tech, lots of XR, AR, VR happening, makerspace, robotics. Educators could build and code and test things out. 3D printing happening tied to curriculum specifically now, which I think is a new kind of lens for 3D printing, where it's been kind of fun and attached to coding and attached to makerspace labs. But now it's starting to be attached to actual curriculum in schools. And for me, that at least that was a new piece that I was interested in learning a little more about. Lots of sessions central to design thinking, inquiry thinking, and immersive learning. So that was incredibly exciting to see because I think that this has always been on the periphery, and FETC really put it front and center. When you walked in the expo hall, you immediately were involved in hands-on experiences. When we think about all these tools I just talked about in our theme of extended reality and immersive learning, really ultimately is a vehicle for creativity. So things from around the sessions, I heard about it's a strategic lever for deep learning, play, and storytelling. So being able to involve students in that hands-on environment that kind of drags them into a learning space that maybe they would have been reticent to join otherwise. And that really is the premise of Phygital learning. So here at Phygital Labs, we love this storyline for sure. I also heard a little soundbite about ultimate durable skills in an automated world. So talking about students who are creators, who are the ones driving the designs, who are the ones ideating and thinking and building empathy in a design environment, that's something that cannot be automated. It cannot be replaced. And I disagree with Threads founder Mosseri when he just recently posted that authenticity is replicable. I don't think it is. And FETC was definitely a case for agreeing with me on that point. Lots of connected experiences. So as I just mentioned previously on our theme slide, it was really interesting to see the connection being made. So for me, in the past 10 years of extended reality showing up at conferences, it's been, there's a curriculum library, maybe it's attached to like a science or a social studies, but often it's seen as like a fun extra. Um, that some of the pitches like, oh, kids could do this on a Friday or in their spare time, or do you have a coding club? Now we're starting to see crisp alignment between these tools and CTE workforce, and that is a good thing. So one of the taglines I kept hearing is career connected learning, a shift away from college readiness into career connectedness. And I think that is also a good thing. And yes, I'm getting a ping from the chat from Amy, who's of course a CTE coordinator nearby me in the Seattle area. And she's saying she loves to learn more about these CTE connections. Yes, me too, for sure. All right. Finally, I want to highlight my Expo Hall item for this theme of extended reality and immersive learning experiences. The vendor that I'm highlighting here is Optima. So Optima has a VR curriculum for STEM and CTE, but what I really got excited about, because I've seen XR before, of course, and virtual reality and education through lots of different tools, their library. Their library is pretty substantial. It reminds me of some apps that I've seen in the past that no longer exist, honestly. And so I'm excited to see a new one, Optima. I'm putting the link in the chat for those who have joined this live. For those of you that have are watching the recording, you can check it in the video description and show notes. But ultimately, the virtual field trips was something that I got specifically excited about. I think that it would be amazing. And the video and content that I saw from Optima showed a group of students, like 5 maybe, working in a station, and they were all on a virtual field trip together. They were walking around, they were exploring, they were discussing, and we're moving away from one student being involved in an activity on a headset. This was moving into they're enjoying that experience together and then are able to come out of that digital experience and discuss it in a physical, real, authentic way. So that's what I'm choosing to highlight for theme 3. Moving on to theme 4, student voice and engagement. Student participation, game-based learning definitely showed up. I'm thrilled with that because in the past we've seen game-based learning and esports be actually kind of looked over at some of our conferences. Maybe there's 1 or 2 tiny sessions. There was an entire crew, an entire esports theater, very prominent, CDW hosting that at FETC. So interactive gaming platforms, a lot of student-led showcases. There were students in our keynote. There were student panels, student commentators, student co-presenters, not just the audience in a, tertiary way. They were definitely digging into the work itself. Very exciting. Models for engagement for SEL, of course, career connected learning. Exciting to see students really truly getting involved. Bet UK is happening this week, and traditionally students show up at Bet on Fridays. I don't generally see students at other edtech events, and FETC involved students, local schools. I'm going to talk about something else here at the end that involves students, really making it an effort to have students show up, and I love that. So speaking of authentic roles in the edtech space, I just mentioned we saw students as co-presenters, co-creators, included on panels. Very cool. Students roaming around, talking to the educators. I'm not going to say working at booths. I don't want to make it sound like kids were put to work at the event, but they were hanging out at booths of things they love, like Snorkel and School AI. And they were like, hey, come hear about how I use this in my classroom. And that was pretty awesome to see. Students as characters in the keynote. I mentioned Alana Winnick's amazing keynote earlier and how students were a part of that conversation. Pretty exciting. Student reflections showcased in the poster sessions. So not just educators sharing what they did, but student voice. Students' videos showing up on monitors in the posters. Students sharing the poster sessions at times. Very, very cool. So a lot of the story, the narrative happening around student voice with esports, game-based learning, students as creators, centered around agency belonging and really how to shape how the technology is used. We heard kids, using their empowered voices to say things like, I want to be careful about how I use my data, or I want to be able to trust this tool, or I want to know where my videos are being stored. Very cool to hear those themes kind of attaching themselves as we moved along through the event. The tool that I'm choosing to showcase here from the Expo Hall is Lego Education. Lego Education just recently put out in time for FETC and also, in connection with Bet UK, I'm sure, which is happening right now. But they put out recently a pretty amazing video on their new AI initiative. Now, I've heard some feedback around their new spike pricing. I'm not super excited about that, kind of concerned. I'm going to post a link here in the chat to learn more for those of you that are here live. But just look it up, education, Lego, AI, search those words. They released a new student written policy. The video is adorable. Policy is fabulous. And ultimately, they've reinvented their AI and robotics kits to be aligned with what they say at Lego students want based on their research and evidence. So that's pretty interesting. The pricing model, again, has changed, and I've heard some negative feedback on that. However, that aside, we also know that they worked with real kids to design the work that they're doing. So that is worth checking out. All right, everyone. Theme number 5, wellness, balance, and stability. So amid all the new tools, there was a very clear focus on wellness and realistic implementation. Digital wellness and managing tech overload for teachers and students were both called out as key design constraints for good ed tech. So some of the leadership sessions emphasize sustainable rollout, professional learning, bridging instructional technology with IT. So tools actually improve outcomes, not just add complexity for every teacher involved. There was a wellness center at FETC. I saw the same thing at TETC in December, giving educators an opportunity to take a break from the conference. And I think we're trying to model what should be happening in our schools. So connected specifically to ed tech, we saw a lot of apps talking about not only how simple they are, but how they're not adding to a teacher's day. And that is incredibly important. So ultimately, we're protecting saturation. And here's some of the sound bites and things I heard from around the event attached to this theme. People are rethinking screen time. You might have seen some articles coming out even just recently on, Utah just voted to all but ban screens for their K-3 learners. We're seeing information about notification overloads, not giving alerts anymore in apps. App alerts are dying. AI policy is becoming something where we're actually protecting kids from AI because of that overload. So fascinating theme there. Having joy, play, and creativity as essential and not an extra was also thematic. A lot of the apps and sessions were talking about students being playful and joyful and what they're getting out of their educational experience being more than just curriculum, but a life experience. And I think it's exciting to begin processing what that might look like from a standardized test and curriculum perspective, but it's exciting to have that conversation started. We also saw some sessions on decision making with leadership specifically, and their filter that they're looking through here is not the new flashy thing. Put down your glitter and swag, companies, because these schools are looking for, is it sustainable? Can we pay for it? Can we get training? Can we invest in this as a partnership, not as something that we're just putting in a proof of concept and then, hoping will not go out of business in 2 years? So that has been incredibly exciting. I think it's interesting, the implication here, because it does move us away from startups. And often our startups are the companies that we need to be paying attention to because they're doing things new and interesting. However, sometimes they're not sustainable. So there is a whole startup area at FETC, and I did explore over there and give some companies some feedback. But ultimately, with sustainability, we end up kind of pendulum swinging over to those big, big companies that we know are going to be around longer. So interesting to have that conversation and think about what that means in our schools. For theme 5, I'm choosing to highlight Navigate 360 from the Expo Hall, and I'll post the link to Navigate 360 in the chat. It's pretty straightforward. I'll just typing that in there. I didn't have it copied. There we go. And again, check the description if you're watching this video later. The Navigate 360 is really a whole being app. You could choose to use a wide variety of their tools like visitor management and crisis response. What I was interested in is the character education curriculum. So lining right up with the opportunity to focus more on well-being in our students and protecting the saturation of curriculum and tech all the time, really digging into what does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be compassionate? What does it look like to use metacognition? Like, what do these words even mean? We know in our media, in our world, that we're kind of seeing some character cracks, and that comes from a wide variety of sources on the internet, and we'd like to bring that back. So I wanted to highlight Navigate 360. Now, as we start to wrap up our FETC recap, I want to point out one of the most exciting things that happened, honestly, in the whole event, and that was the student drone show. A 500 drone performance coded, designed, and run by a high school drone team in partnership with an industry expert. The show was not just entertainment, it was a capstone for a CTE program. The students are learning aviation and coding and safety protocols. They're learning client communication, and they got to showcase that entire thing on a national stage. So it really underscored the theme of FETC. When we give students access to professional tools and good coaching and authentic audiences, they do work that looks and feels like the real world, not schoolwork. The drone show was framed as a live example of students doing real world production. So, engineering, obviously coding, media production, project management, entrepreneurship, all wrapped into a single experience. The theme of FETC was changing the game. And the messaging here was that students are changing the game. And these students from Colorado integrated games and retro games into their presentation. It lasted about 11 minutes. It was a full-scale production, absolutely mind-blowing. I have a video of the entire thing, thanks to my friend Lori Guion. I was just watching it, and she took a video of the whole thing and sent it to me. But it really was advanced technology, but not as consumers, as creators. These students designed an experience for thousands of adults, and it was truly a highlight. Amy, I know, is joining us in the chat and is being really active. Check out the student drone program in Peninsula School District right nearby where I live, if you're interested in learning more about these programs. But super cool to experience that in person. So if this has been helpful to you, we will be leading Phygital Learning event recaps for all of the events that we attend. We want to bring a little bit of that experience, a little bit of the themes, the sessions, the learning, the Expo Hall to educators all around the world who aren't always able to attend these types of events. So we'll be at NCCE and NC Ties next in February and March. So about one conference per month for the next little bit here. So be looking for our Phygital recaps to join those and learn a little bit more about what's happening at these regional and national events. Also, if you're just now joining the Phygital Labs community, we'd love to work with you. We offer workshops and events and all sorts of learning experiences. We build curriculum and make sure that we're following the 5 things I just talked about. So make sure you're subscribed to us, get our news, follow us on social media, and stay connected. Thanks, everyone.